Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. We are going to get started on carrying on with this piece that we started yesterday. Let me move you back just a little bit more so you can see. It's a lovely little Bombay Company hallway table, which has some great little details. We're using all DIY, Debbie's Design Diary paint, which is a clay-based paint, low VOC, great blending techniques. And yesterday we got started a little bit. So base coat was done in faded burlap, which is kind of a creamy beigey color. So just a nice neutral to start. Then we added a little bit of petticoat pink and some of the cherry picked up here. And we added a little bit down in some of the other areas. And then we began accenting with a very distinct color, which was a diluted version of water lily. So in this periwinkle blue. Now it's not going to stay as bright, but we added it using a syringe. So we diluted the paint almost 50%, and then we kind of squirted it very controlled way to allow it to flow down, to get into a little bit of these grooves in a way that's difficult with a paintbrush, unless I'm using a really fine paintbrush and going and doing this. And then we used our spray bottle just to be able to have the rest of it flow down here. This in particular is where some of the color is going to go and be colored, kind of covered up a bit, but we are going to get started doing a couple things today. One, I want to do a little bit of dry brushing. I want to bring in a bit more gray, and we're going to be adding that to some of the base of these legs a little bit, certainly a little bit to the others. And I like typically a lot of times when I'm dry brushing to use a really kind of cheap and old used chip brush. So you can see that this is old and it's kind of jagged. It's not nice and flat, so that when I go to dry brush, I'm going to be able to have areas where I just don't get any paint. So for dry brushing, I'm offloading my brush a lot so that I don't have tons of paint on there. I want to be able to control how much paint is going onto this. And I want to slowly kind of cover up a little bit of that periwinkle in here and pull back a little bit more of the gray. And I'm not going to kind of be freaking out about exactly how much is covered, because we're going to use that same kind of syringe technique with some of the cherry picked as well, and then possibly a darker gray. So we are going to be adding a fair bit more color. And one of the things that I also want to do is bring a little bit of that periwinkle up into here. So we need to be adding a little bit of the gray up here, but we also need to add some of the periwinkle. Now this is just, from yesterday, this is just our base coat. So we don't have full coverage yet everywhere with our paint. So we're still at the adding layers and building some of that paint color upstage. Before I put my knee into that lid. But when we're going for this kind of older, kind of textured look, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is that it's kind of that buildup of color that we're going for, and not just a solid coverage if we were just simply one coating it or one doing kind of one color on it. So I don't know if you can see fully, but probably when you're looking at this leg compared to this leg, you can see that this dry brushing is kind of dulling down that periwinkle blue a little bit.
Listen, Derek watching.
Right? Hey Hi, Liz. Hi, Derek. Lori, you're back too. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see where this little table goes. I'm not great about always turning around and seeing you guys and seeing any questions, but my husband's sitting right here, so we can put him to work if you've got questions or thoughts. Everybody, I'm assuming, is staying safe and hanging out a lot inside. I mean, it's nice when there's nice weather to be able to get out, but there's starting to be a lot of people that are even freaking out about the number of people that are out walking on the streets. I know our neighborhood has this kind of communication board, and there's people asking people to just stay inside, don't go outside. But I'm like, there's a lot of space for social distancing outside, right? Without being in other people's faces. And you got to think that fresh air it's got to be good as well for keeping people healthy. I know Friday, I guess, because yesterday was all terrible weather and storming here and everything, but Friday, I guess, we went for a nice long 1.5-hour walk. Got to walk up past my 2 oldest kids live in a complex, and got to text them and say, we're standing outside. So they went out onto their stoop, and was able from a distance to be able to see my kids, see my grandkids, make sure everybody was okay, and at least say hi. Remember their little faces, if nothing else. Seems so weird, right? And you're kind of going, no grandma hugs, no nothing. But everybody was well, safe, seemed a little bored. But that's just the start for the kids. There's no way. I know the school down the street from us still has their sign saying, hey, we'll be back at school on April 6th, which I don't think it's very realistic. I can't imagine that happening, that in a short week all of a sudden all this is going to be fine and kids will be back in school. Okay, so this gray that I'm using is letterpress gray, again from DIY. So it's kind of a bit of a mid-tone gray. It's not their lightest, not their darkest. So we're just adding a little bit of that gray down into everything, starting to take a little bit of that brightness away. Almost certainly I'm still looking at leaving some of that color. Now I'll try and turn this without knocking my dog out. You know, it's always inevitable. As soon as I start planning on putting stuff together to come on live, she plunks herself right down in front of the piece and goes to sleep. And then I'm trying to wake her up, and she's old and her bones hurt, and I'm trying to move her, and she's looking at me like I'm evil. What are you doing? And she wants to be part of everything, but she's smart enough to know, lying right in front of whatever I'm doing keeps her front and center. So I just keep loading my brush again off of my my plate here, just so I keep getting a lot of dry. And because this is such an loose hair, uneven little brush, and just getting small flecks of paint, small little rough cross hatchings of the paint going on, which kind of allows a lot of the undercolor still to show, but it kind of dulls it down a little bit. Different than a wash because it's not everywhere on the piece, but we get some color sticking in rough spots and rough patches. So it looks like I'm kind of painting painting everywhere, but I'm not getting paint everywhere. So this was the first step that I wanted to do, is just get a little bit, oh, sorry, Harley, woke the dog. She's giving me the, you must have done that deliberately eye. So what are you guys doing at home? Who's been doing house cleaning, major cleaning and disinfecting? I would love to say that I have. I had a spurt in there. I had one moment. It was fairly short-lived. I got some things done, some floors all washed and disinfected. And one of them was the bathroom. One was the kitchen. So I think those are two of the main areas to consider in the midst of all of this. But it's hard to it's hard to feel like I am seriously cleaning and disinfecting everything when I've got tons of furniture staggered all over the place, and piece in the middle of the living room that I'm going to be doing, and let alone if I start breaking out the sander to be able to smooth down a piece, because that goes everywhere. Sanding dust. Although now we're getting some nice weather, so I can start to periodically haul some pieces outside and do any of the necessary sanding should it become necessary. Okay. I'm not worrying about the top yet. That will be one of the last things I'll worry about. I'll wait and see what the piece ends up looking like, and as a result, what the coordinating top should look like. Just again, because it might not be as busy as the front kind of main legs may be, and that's okay. But I want to see what the overall finished color ends up looking like, and then what makes the most sense for the color that I apply onto the top. It has a full coverage of the faded burlap, so it's nice and covered, nice and smooth, but doesn't have any of the other colors attached to it or layered onto it as yet. Because we'll see what the flow of the colors looks like, and then kind of what ends up being necessary for the piece. Okay. So this gray that I layered on now, I expect that I will probably end up doing that again. Maybe a couple of times, depending upon how many layers go in and what else I end up doing with it. But what I did want to do is take a little bit of this periwinkle, and this is the wash, so this has been thinned down a little bit. It's a little bit thicker toward the bottom, and I'm just taking a fan brush, and I just want to add a little bit of that up into here so that it's a little bit more cohesive, kind of pulls it in a little bit from the legs. Again, this is probably going to get some of it covered up, and I'm not looking for it to be exact in any of these locations, but as I start to layer some of the other colors on, I don't want it to be a stark contrast, so I want a little bit of this blue to pop up here and coordinate in. And that's one of the things I find too, that when you're looking at adding colors here and there, even if they're just touches or small little hits of color, is taking a look at creating a bit of balance to your piece. You know, so that if you added a color just solely to the top and nowhere else in the rest of the piece, then it's going to draw your eye to that section. And that's okay if that's what you're looking for. Then maybe you're specifically highlighting or detailing that particular area. But then you should be doing that very deliberately or strategically, right? This is such a small piece that I'm not looking at necessarily highlighting a particular spot on it. Ultimately, I want it to have a kind of a complete cohesive look. So as a result, I want to make sure that once we start getting coverage elsewhere, that these little pops of the periwinkle that are coming out down here, that you're getting little hints of them up in the rest of the piece also. And that helps it seem more like it belongs. Right now, the contrast between the pinks and the purples here and the legs is pretty stark. And I get that. But partly because we don't have these colors down here and we don't have this color up here. So we just want to add little bits of it, just in the creases here. So it seems a little bit more like it belongs. And it may be something as we carry on with this piece that I end up doing again. Once we keep going with some of the layers, if enough of this isn't popping through, I may add another little hit of it. Maybe I decide, yeah, that was crazy. That was too much of it. So then I get to cover it up as well. And that's the great thing about paint, is that you mess it up and you just paint over it, right? So, you know, sometimes when I'm painting in front of you guys, I don't necessarily have a plan, and I do something and I'm going, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't a good thing to have done. In which case, then I can just kind of cover it up and say, yeah, that was too much of that, or, you know, that wasn't a good color to have added in. Who knows? Right? I had a moment of that with the periwinkle on the legs, to tell you the truth, as I was doing it. Kind of like, that might have been a little brighter than I thought. But again, I've got some flexibility with it. So, what I was thinking that I wanted to do was start bringing some of this cherry-picked color down into the legs. And we're going to do that by adding the syringes again. Oh, I should have grabbed some paper towel.
Behind you.
Oh, and I do have it. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Just because we know from yesterday, I'm going to make a mess. So I am just adding into just a tiny little cup some of the cherry-picked color. You can see how deep of kind of that rich kind of deep Bing cherry color it is. And then I am adding a whack of water. Firstly, because DIY paint is really heavily pigmented. So I can dilute it and still get a lot of intensity of color. I also need it a lot thinner though, for it to work, kind of getting sucked up into the syringe. And I want it to flow down the piece very readily. The blue was a little bit thicker, which was perfect. This, I want to have slightly lighter coverage going over the blue. So you can see, and I really don't need that much. So that's why I'm using the little Dixie cup, because otherwise I have a tendency to make way too much of this stuff. So you can see how watery that is, right? It's very loose, very watery. That's about perfect. And I'm just taking my syringe and loading it up. So again, these syringes, which are just for administering liquid meds to small kids, right? So they're not designed to have a needle in them. They're nice and fat and thick. They've got little measurements on them so that you can easily see how many milliliters you're administering for kids. But they work great for this kind of application, right? Where we're just kind of in a bit of a controlled way. Squeezing some of that color, allowing it to flow down the piece. Now, in as controlled a way as you can, given that it's going to go where it's going to go. You don't have total control over that. So there is a kind of an organic element to it that kicks in there. And you can see it doesn't take all that much. Now these bigger drips coming down the legs, I just want to loosen those a little bit. Okay, I'm cool with the harsher lines up here, but I just want to soften the tops a little bit. And these pieces that come down here, let them kind of organically flow down. It's almost like they're painting the bottom of those legs for me. And this pooling at the bottom is what I'll go and I will mop up loosely later. So I need to reload. And I gotta tell you, this is kind of fun, guys. There we go. Let that drip. And I'm just turn this a little bit. Just let that purple flow. And I kind of like the look of this kind of flowing down these legs a little organically rather than totally solid. And let's get a little bit more. I'm kind of loving that look, actually, and how that's flowing down and how it's building up the color on there. Anybody else out there paint that gets excited about some of these things? This is where I start saying these things, and my husband just kind of looks at me, rolls his eyes like, you're a little strange. You're a lot strange. He's shaking his head at that.
You are strange.
There you go. Full agreement on the strange part. Okay, I'm just thinking. I'm going to let some of that purple wash kind of roll around on there a little bit. And along the edge. Not minding how that's looking. Not part of the original plan, but let's get that dripping a bit. Thank goodness for drop cloths. Okay. Now, I think you're going to wet my big spray gun, water gun here. I'm just going to wet that paper towel and just take up a little bit of the excess. Soften it a little bit. That's a mess. And then loosen up those marks. Let them flow a little bit. Obviously not necessarily a technique I'm doing on a big honking buffet. I am kind of liking the flow. Getting a bit of that wash technique down on here. Try to avoid the dog. Okay, that's actually kind of cool, guys. Okay, so that's cool enough that I think I'm going to add some deliberately on top. It's got some dimension to it, so I'm kind of liking how that's looking if we started to layer some of that. The one hand for this. This is just water, but it's a little bit more heavy duty than my mister. And I'm just moving the table around to get that paint that I added to kind of flow in different directions. I don't necessarily want it to have big streaks. Hopefully I'm missing the dog. She could be very colorful after this.
No, not on her feet.
And I'm not looking for it to become a uniform wash. So it doesn't have to be everywhere. Because if I end up liking this, I may end up having to do something similar with more colors. Okay. That kind of works for me. Okay, that's pretty cool. Which kind of means I have more of a mess that needs to dry up here. It also means I've got a little bit of more purple that I think I want in the legs a bit. Okay. So I think you guys can even see that kind of flowing around. See it moving and shifting. What I am liking is the purple over top of that periwinkle. It's creating kind of its own color with some of that periwinkle popping through. And it's kind of softening the periwinkle, but it's adding a little bit of this color that's kind of echoing through that purple. adding a little bit more dimension to it, which is kind of cool. Oh, I've got a colorful drop cloth happening now. Okay. So we're going to get a couple of the little drips underneath. Okay. We're gonna let that dry now because that's pretty darn wet. So we're gonna let the bottom dry. It's kind of making me think I have to do something similar to the top though. In which case, if I am going to do that with that purple wash, well, heck, I think I need to do that now. So that if it drips, it's going to drip down while this is all still kind of wet. So I have some of it made up. We might as well just go for it, right? We might as well just say, hey, that's what we're going to be doing. And allow some of the drips down onto the piece. So let's get this top all wet. Okay, my spray bottle wants to spray that way. Always an awesome thing to do in the middle of your living room. I'm sure all the furniture around me appreciates it. Nick, could you do me a favor and just fill that bottle up again for me? Thank you. Get my mister filled up. It kind of squirts in any direction. Unlike these big guys that like to be upright only. Great, thank you. Perfect. Ah, so much better. Now we got it going. Bigger puddles. Now let me start moving a little bit of it around. Ooh, that went on the dog. She just sleeps through everything now. She's pretty much deaf. And she's got a thick coat, so she doesn't feel any of this getting on her. Poor thing. She's going to be a little purple in spots. So you guys can see that rolling around. Just keep moving it. And then we'll come back and worry about the drips all over, which I'm not minding. I'm getting new ones on the bottom too.
Put your chair there.
Yeah. Make sure I'm still on a... Oh, that's a big puddle down over there. Try to make sure I'm still on the drop cloth at least. Sometimes these things just kind of take a life of their own and you move in unexpected ways here. Which is usually why I wear paint pants and clothes. Well, these aren't new pants. They're kind of older pants, so it's okay. See them? Not on the couch there. Covered. Figures. moving over there. Looks pretty cool, right? Definitely messy. Just using some of the spray water to kind of help move the paint around a little bit to some of the areas it's not getting to. And maybe I'll just do thin a little bit in some of those areas. Yikes. Little finger painting never hurt. And let's just soften some of those lines up a little. And move it again. Okay, that's not bad where that's settled. Get a little bit of this. So just softening some of the drips that might be on the front edges a little bit. And that's good. Okay, awesome. Just going to take some paper towel and catch some of the drips just that are happening on the bottom edges. Okay, awesome. Now we're going to let that dry. See a couple spots where my fingerprints. My fingers took off a little bit of paint, but we can get that after. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, let my drop cloth dry out. See about cleaning off myself and the dog a little bit, who happily slept through it all, even though she definitely has got some purple spots on her now. And then we're going to come back in with some other colors tomorrow. Maybe a little bit more gray. Definitely touching up some of the purples, seeing where we need to add some other colors. But paint pour part, unexpected, wasn't planning it, but I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of liking it. Tomorrow I'm going to make sure that I have some of my sponges down here as well, just in case we need to start layering some of the gray tones on top of things a little bit. But hey, thanks for joining me. You're definitely part of the creative process here because, you know, we end up going in some unexpected places occasionally. But I'm kind of liking where this is going right now. All I'm going to be doing is just watching for some of the drips, creating some harsh lines, adding a little bit of water to it while it's settling, just to soften that out a little bit, so that I don't have to worry about doing that with paint tomorrow. And then once we're all dry, we can carry on. thanks for joining me today. I hope that you guys are keeping busy, doing something creative. Go get messy, have a little fun. I'll see you tomorrow.